Good morning. Okay, I guess I'll start officially now. Good morning and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Lisa Nicole Matthews, 114th President of the National Press Club and Assignment Manager for U.S. Video at the Associated Press. Thank you for joining us this morning, both for folks here in the Holman Lounge and those listening and viewing online for our headliner event with the new president of the AFL-CIO, Liz Shuler, the nation's labor federation. It's okay, class. For those of you watching today, we are happy to accept your questions, and I will ask as many as time permits. To submit a question, please email headliners@press.org and put Schuler in the subject line. For those in the room, we have circulated cards for you to fill out. According to a recent Gallup poll, support for labor unions is at a 65-year high, with 68% of Americans saying they approve of labor unions. And across America, workers fed up with long hours, poor benefits, and stagnant wages are pushing back. In recent weeks, unions representing workers in food production, healthcare, and Hollywood have threatened strikes or have gone on strike over a variety of issues. Two unions representing 24,000 nurses in California and Oregon on Monday authorized a strike to call for higher wages and better staffing. Earlier this month, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, representing 60,000 Hollywood production workers, authorized a strike to demand higher pay and better on-set working conditions. And just last week, workers at Kellogg's cereal factories joined picket lines in protest of benefit cuts, vacation time, and the loss of jobs to factories in Mexico. Despite all of the widespread pro-labor sentiment, employees who have sought to form unions have faced backlash from employers, including threats to move jobs overseas. In April, a massive effort to unionize workers at Amazon warehouses in Alabama failed when employees voted 2-1 against unionizing. In Washington, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, also known as the PRO Act, remains in play. It's endorsed by President Biden and has already passed in the House. If it wins final passage, the PRO Act will amend decades-old labor laws to penalize companies that attempt to bust unions and retaliate against workers. Into the fray steps our guest today, Liz Shuler. As president of the AFL-CIO, she represents 57 major unions and combined has 12.5 million members. That's a lot of folks. Ms. Schuler is the first woman to lead the organization. She served as Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO from 2009 until this past summer when she was chosen by the Federation's Executive Council to fill the post after the death of longtime President Richard Trumka. She has worked as a union organizer at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers since she graduated from college, where she majored in journalism. Ms. Schuler, welcome to the National Press Club.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Wow, what an incredible introduction. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I also want to say how empowering it is for me to see your leadership as you're leading this all-woman team at the Press Club of officers. And I want to thank the Headliners Committee for organizing this event, and Jamie Horowitz was in the room as well for your support. And to the journalists who make the Press Club a national institution, who keep our country informed and strengthen our democracy, thank you. I have so much respect for you, and it's so good to be with you here in person and I guess online, right? We have a big viewership watching us out there in cyberspace, but I truly do appreciate the work that you do, especially in this environment, and it's an honor to be with you today. And I also want to recognize the union members who are in the audience, who have traveled to be here today. Of Corey Upchurch of AFSCME Local 1959, who makes sure that special needs students get to school safely here in the district. Rochelle Ramsey Walker, of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Verlissa Taylor of the Laborers Union, and of course these women remind us of the importance of infrastructure investment and that women build this nation. That's right. McCall Zerboni, a union member and professional soccer player, who I will say more about in a moment, and Keith Bragg and Darlene Carpenter of Bakery Workers Local 358 in Richmond, Virginia, who took on Nabisco and won. I think most of you know that in recent weeks, more than 1,000 workers went on strike at Nabisco's bakeries and distribution centers. Nabisco and its parent company Mondelez had threatened to ship good union jobs to Mexico, if the workers didn't agree to major concessions despite record corporate profits. These are the workers who made the snacks that got us through lockdown during the pandemic. Okay, Ritz crackers, Oreos, some of us double stuff Oreos. I had the privilege of walking the picket line with Keith and Darlene and the other union members in Richmond. And the company tried to pit workers against each other by offering a two-tiered healthcare system that weakened coverage for new hires. And the answer from the union was a resounding no. And to quote Keith and Darlene, "We don't sell out our young workers. We're fighting for the next generation." And I heard that over and over again on the picket line. We don't sell out. And many of you as journalists have written about the labor market in recent months. There's a lot for assignment editors to explore. The pandemic, a change in administrations, the return to office debate, the great resignation, inflation. But while these forces may present new questions and challenges, the stakes remain fundamentally the same. Justice, fairness, the right to organize, bargain, and have our voices heard. And one of the most persistent questions reporters have been asking is, are people refusing to work? An NBC headline in June put it this way: Is it a sluggish labor market or workers positioning themselves for better opportunities? That was the headline. The answer to that question can be found in workplaces and communities all across America. And as we gather here today, thousands of workers are on strike for a better deal and a better life. Coal miners in Alabama, nurses in Massachusetts, steel workers and machinists in West Virginia, distillery workers in Kentucky, hospital workers in upstate New York, iron workers in Pennsylvania, and Kellogg's workers in 4 states, riding the momentum of their compatriots from Nabisco. And at this moment, 60,000 film and television workers of the IATSE, who make our favorite shows and movies, are bargaining at the table right now for adequate sleep, meal breaks, living wages. It's as if they're fighting for the weekend all over again. And they're ready to strike if necessary. And the same goes for 35,000 workers at Kaiser Permanente in California, as Lisa mentioned, that have made the same decision: strike if they can't get a fair deal. Some are calling this Striketober. I call it Exhibit A for why we need to rebalance the scales and put workers back in the center of our economy. The headlines reporting a shortage of workers are missing the point. The pandemic laid bare the inequities of our system, and as we try to get beyond COVID, working people are refusing to return to crappy jobs with low pay. Essential workers are tired of being thanked one day and then treated as expendable the next day. The headline isn't that there's a shortage of people willing to return to work. Instead, it's a scarcity story. We have a shortage of safe, good-paying, sustainable jobs. And the good news is that workers feel a new sense of power and leverage, and they aren't willing to settle. And the solution, once again, can be found in the labor movement. Unions are how Americans have always turned bad jobs into good jobs. And my focus as president of the AFL-CIO is building a modern labor movement that can meet this moment. A movement that dreams big and takes risks and isn't afraid to fail. A movement that is alive and well from Silicon Valley to the American South and all the places in between where workers are trying to claim their share of the American dream. And a movement that leverages our power to bring women and people of color from the margins to the center at work, in our unions, and in the economy. Our newest affiliated union, the National Women's Soccer League Players Association, is showing us what a modern labor movement looks like. They are using their platform to speak out against harassment and abuse on the job. And I'm sure you saw the recent piece that Kaya McCullough wrote about her experience playing right here in Washington, D.C. for the Washington Spirit. She was bullied, intimidated, emotionally abused by management. There were racist and degrading nicknames, and so she cut her rookie season short. She didn't feel safe. Playing the sport she loved at the highest level was no match for the league's toxic culture. Across the NWSL, outrage built. The players said no more and refused to play until the league was held accountable. This is just the beginning of these phenomenal women exercising their power. McCall Zerboni, a midfielder for the New Jersey, New York Gotham, is one of those women. McCall, I'm so glad you're here with us today, and we are here to give voice to your struggle. And the AFL-CIO has your back, and we are committed to building a professional sports world with more leaders like you and less people like John Gruden. Right. And this solidarity guides everything we do, whether it's taking on Amazon or co-creating technology to empower workers, whether it's enshrining labor laws for this century by passing the PRO Act and the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act, or whether it's pushing our elected officials to get President Biden's jobs bills done across the finish line. We have everything lined up. A pro-worker administration in Congress, 68% public support for unions, including 77% among young people. That's the highest mark since 1965. And workers all across the country are standing up, speaking out, and taking risks. They see unions as the answer. So this is our chance. We have a window, an historic opportunity. We cannot and will not let it pass us by. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Wow.
Thank you.
You're awesome.
No, you are.
No, really. For folks who are watching, I just want you to know that it's electric in here right now. It's electric.
I come out of the Electrical Workers Union, so
Yes.
that's appropriate.
It's
there
electric.
You go.
That's so good. That's good stuff. So I've been so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So let's just start in general. The nation is so divided right now. I mean, it has been since the prior administration. You represent, the AFL-CIO represents 57 unions that are just as diverse as the country.
That's right.
How do you bring 57 diverse unions together around a unified agenda?
If I had the answer to that question, I would be a very wealthy person right now. No, it is a challenge because we do have a very diverse membership. We come across all sectors of the economy, all industries, different backgrounds, but the values are the same. And so we tend to think through that lens of fairness and equity and inclusion and really rooted in economic issues. So the quest for a good paying job that you can support your family on, that you can retire with dignity, really is what unites us. And so when we talk politics, those issues aren't Democrat or Republican, right? Having a good job and a good way to support your family brings people together. And in fact, I think the labor movement can be a place for uniting people, and that we can actually heal divisions that we see in other aspects of our society and our economy in the labor movement, because we are family. We are union brothers, sisters, and siblings, right? That we treat each other with respect, hear each other out, and it's a place where we can actually have dialogue, debate, and come out the other side with a better understanding. That's my hope, is that the labor movement can actually be a healing influence in this country.
That's fair. You mentioned the values. But what do you do when unions that are at odds over certain issues, such as laborers who build like oil pipelines and other unions involved with solar and public transit? I spoke with Cecil Roberts and Joe Manchin not too long ago.
I remember that.
United Mine Workers of America. And they told us here at the club that, green jobs don't pay as much as jobs in the carbon-based fuels. It's not enough being done to ease the transition. So how do you negotiate those kinds of differences? Because it's about a lot more than values. It's really about bottom line, right?
Sure. I remember that because it was a news-making event. And we were so proud to see, the mine workers leading in this space, because you're right, this climate crisis we're in is urgent. And the labor movement, we think the solution runs right through the labor movement, because this is all about creating that next generation of good, sustainable jobs. And in the fossil industry, we've worked overtime, as I said earlier, to make bad jobs good jobs. And those jobs, when those jobs began in the fossil industry, weren't good paying jobs, with high standards and safety requirements, until we got the union and we came together collectively to make those jobs good jobs. So we can do that again in the next generation of the energy economy. And really bringing people together through the quest for, as I said, a good, sustainable union job, we think unites people. And it's really not a choice between, a clean environment and sustainable jobs. We think that we can have both. And that what we're seeing right now, the investments that we're talking about on Capitol Hill with both of these jobs bills, is going to do just that. We're going to start investing, and that's what this country needs to do to make this transition successful. We've seen how it can be done poorly, in the past, and leaving communities behind. But we have the opportunity now to do those place-based strategies that can put communities to work, especially fossil communities that are dependent on oil and gas and coal, to make sure that we're creating that next generation of good jobs.
So let's talk a little bit about the situation we're currently in with the pandemic and different employers mandating vaccines. Tell us where the AFL-CIO stands on that.
Well, we think everyone should be vaccinated. And we think that the union has a role to play in negotiating that at the table. We have, as you said, 57 unions who are working in partnership with their employers to make sure that everyone gets vaccinated and that we get this pandemic over with. We want to all get back to work and see this economy succeed. And so we think that the union can play a role in that and also be a source for good information. As we know, with social media and these bubbles that we all seem to be in on Facebook and other places, that we want to be the source for trusted information, and people trust their union. And they trust their family, they trust their union. So I think that we can actually be the place where we can get the right information into people's hands.
Okay. The Pew Research Center recently released a survey that found that 66% of the unemployed had seriously considered changing their field of work. You mentioned something about the Great Resignation.
Right.
Do you think this assessment of work is temporary, or do you think we can address the labor shortages that seem to be just about everywhere despite this feeling of a great resignation?
Yeah, it's interesting whether it's temporary because, we had record numbers in April and then we saw again in August, millions of people making this change, making a different decision. And there's a number of factors there, I think, to unpack. Certainly, we're still in a pandemic. People don't feel safe, right? The Delta variant is a big question mark, what the impact will continue to be and whether workplaces will be safe places to be. We have the childcare crisis where, we still have people who can't get to work because we don't have adequate childcare in this country. And we're hoping that we'll have a solution again with this investment that Congress is talking about. Can we finally, as a country, invest in a system of care, both for children, for elderly, the differently abled, to make it so that people feel secure and can get to work, because that's really one of the most important decisions workers make is, providing for their families in that way. So the care piece is still a big unanswered question. And I think some people are just saying, you know what, I don't want to go back to a crappy job. A low-paid job that I don't feel appreciated. I'm working my tail off and I'm not getting compensated well and I'm putting my health at risk. So I'm going to do something different. So we are seeing some of that as well. And, workers that I talk to, I know nurses, of course, on the front lines of this pandemic, still are not getting the safety protection that they need. They're working overtime because the staffing levels are not there. And the hospitals can make those decisions, right, to add more staff. But I think with their looking at the bottom line, they're putting, their ability to make profits over what really needs to happen is to increase staffing levels so that patients can get the care that they need.
You have mentioned returning to work and things around healthcare and family and things like that, which makes me think about the role of women in unions. And you've talked in the past about how you want to make women, and specifically women of color, the center of growing unions. Can you talk a little bit about how you plan to do that, and what industries do you see that being more doable than others?
I would love to talk about that. I think it's a really exciting time for women in our movement. We've been coming on strong in the economy for some time, and pre-pandemic, of course, we're nearly half the workforce. We're nearly half the labor movement. A lot of people don't realize that the labor movement represents 6.5 million women. We're the largest organization of working women in the country. And a lot of people think of us, as more of male-dominated, right? It's just not true. And as we see the new sectors of the economy growing, the emerging sectors are predominated by women and people of color. And certainly the care industry is one of those industries that we know is growing. And as baby boomers age and we're all taking care of elderly parents, that we need to make sure that those jobs are good jobs. And I think not a lot of attention and focus has been paid to the quality of the jobs that people who are caregivers should have. They are passionate people. Most people who are in the childcare industry that you talk to, it is a calling, right? But they have to make the choice of, do I do what I love or do I provide for myself and my family, often because there's such low-wage jobs without benefits. We want to change that, and we think by raising standards, and certainly we're talking about that with these investments with Congress, is to make sure we have a floor. And we want these jobs to be union jobs, where they can come together, exercise their voices and their power, and negotiate for better wages and conditions.
I do want to talk about how all of that fits into the PRO Act, but can you address specifically, and I'm going to ask you again, about the role of women of color? how do you plan to get them engaged more in unions, and what's your strategy for that?
So we need to show women and women of color that the labor movement is a place for them, and that we are dynamic, open, transparent, and wanting of their leadership. And I think in the past we haven't been as intentional about recruiting and enabling women to come up in their leadership. Women lead, don't get me wrong, in all sorts of ways, and in particular behind the scenes in workplaces all across this country. But the leadership role is the key.
Right.
And speak from my own experience, right? Like coming up through a pretty male-dominated union, the Electrical Workers Union. And when I, first started out, I was very young, and it was mainly, older people with more seniority that were in the leadership positions, and they weren't as welcoming of young people, and especially young women's perspective, let alone women of color, right?
Right.
And so I think that's going to be key to show that the labor movement is a place where we are embracing of different leadership styles and perspectives and collaboration and all of the things that women bring to the table. And this is our moment. We're seeing it across the economy. We're seeing it in business. We're seeing it in government, that women are really coming on in their leadership.
So you come out of a construction trade union, as you mentioned before. The infrastructure bill now before Congress, could be a huge boost for labor.
Absolutely.
Some of the Democratic Party's progressive wing, though, are holding it down in exchange for more spending on social programs. So what do you think about that? What are you doing about that?
We need to get both of these jobs bills passed today, ASAP. And both of these bills have incredible investments. It's a generational opportunity to create good jobs, both in the infrastructure bill, where we have had long overdue investment that's been needed in our roads, our bridges, sewers, water systems, broadband, you name it. And this has been a long time coming, and we've been actually looking for this for over a decade. So now is the time. The Build Back Better reconciliation package, equally as important. The two need to travel together. And we want to see the clean energy investments that I just talked about can be a boon for creating a foothold for good paying jobs in an emerging industry that right now, as you alluded to, is largely non-union. So we need to keep our eyes trained on that, as well as the investments in education and healthcare and immigration reform and path to citizenship. And really the agenda that we voted on in the election in 2020 is housed in that Build Back Better investment. And so we want to see what we voted for pass the finish line, and we just need to see some results.
And, President Biden has been described as one of the most pro-union presidents, in history.
Oh, yes.
So, since Harry Truman, I think. But unions haven't always returned the love to Joe. While some AFL-CIO unions IFPTE, I think it is, they were quick to embrace the vaccine mandates. Other unions have been lukewarm or even hostile. Talk about the relationship between unions in the White House right now, and specifically AFL-CIO. What are you looking for from the White House?
The relationship has been outstanding, and I would give his administration an A+, because not only with the policies, but the engagement. We are proactively engaged instead of reactively, where a policy would come down the pike and you'd get a phone call like this is about to happen. We're actually, our voices are heard on the front end of decision making. Everything is looked through a worker's lens, and they even have a commission on worker empowerment.
Okay.
That's vice-chaired by, or co-chaired by the Secretary of Labor and the Vice President. And that's to look through the lens of government and say, what could each of our agencies be doing to help workers organize? The NLRB, one of the most important agencies to the labor movement, because when workers are trying to organize a union, as you know, they're often fired. That gets adjudicated through the National Labor Relations Board. And so to have a pro-worker National Labor Relations Board and General Counsel who are making the day-to-day decisions on workers' lives when they're standing up and taking risks is huge.
Well, how are you dealing with the unions that aren't so pro-Biden White House, the ones who aren't getting on board with the things that you see that are important in that whole Build Back Better agenda?
The way we see it is that it's a whole package. It's not one policy or another, but basically in total, right? What has this administration done to advance the rights of working people? And whether it's the policy decisions, the investments that have been put forward, it's bold, visionary leadership, and that's what we voted for.
I have a question here from Tim Ryan. He's the senior labor reporter with Law 360. Okay. And Tim asks, with NLRB General Counsel Abruzzo's recent memo concerning college athletes' employee status, what should unions be doing to organize in this area? And then secondly, what are some of the challenges to successfully organizing these athletes, and what can be learned from past efforts?
I should probably have McCall up here to answer that question. But I think I'll take a stab at it, which is, the labor movement is a place for everyone, no matter what type of work you do. And sports is increasingly the place for organizing activity and focus on social justice issues, which are absolutely the sweet spot for the labor movement and the sports community to come together. We saw the WNBA players, speaking out against racism and...
Well, the U.S. soccer team, the women's soccer team, major situation.
Oh, absolutely, with the harassment and bullying.
Well, and pay.
And pay. No more side hustles. The campaign that they have running right now where workers, the baseline pay, I think, is $22,000. $22,000. So you have to have 1, 2, and 3 jobs just to make it and be able to play the sport that you love.
Wow.
It's unacceptable, and they're organizing through their union to negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement that will raise pay, but also working conditions, because they're workers. A lot of people think, oh, if you play professional sports, you're not a worker, when indeed you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The labor movement is changing just like our economy is changing, obviously, granted, with the sports. And it, I guess they would say it's not your father's labor movement anymore. It does have more women, it's more racially diverse, it represents professions and professionals outside of manufacturing. What are you doing to reach out to young people? We've kind of talked about women and getting minorities involved, but how do you create opportunities for young people within unions?
Well, we are the place for youth activism, and in fact, you saw those Gallup figures, 77% of young people favorable to unions. When in time have we had that level of favorability? But we need to connect the dots to show that young people who are interested in rising up and speaking out can do that through unions. And of course, we need to pass labor law reform to make it real, to make sure that people can come together and do so without fear. But I think young people are starting to see that, through the pandemic, when people didn't have safety equipment, that it was their union that spoke out, that got them the PPE that they needed. And that, in Silicon Valley, when Google workers walked out to protest sexual harassment, they went back to work the next day, and they didn't have a sustainable model for exercising their power. And we actually got calls from Silicon Valley organizers saying, what is this union? Can you tell us a little bit more about it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a lot of old stereotypes, a lot of just purely, not disinformation, but just lack of information on what unions are and what they can do, especially with the youth of today. But this generation is civically minded. They like to collaborate and work in teams, and I think the hallmarks of this younger generation are naturally a good fit for the labor movement. And so what we're, of course, trying to do is engage our own young members to be leaders and show the youth of America that unions are a place for young people.
So how do you deal with the situation that we saw in Alabama with Amazon? How do you fight the Jeff Bezos world? And why do you think that those workers didn't want to unionize?
Well, Jeff Bezos is a formidable foe, and corporations have a lot of power with the way labor laws are written today. They're broken. That's why we're trying to pass the PRO Act. But the scales are tilted on, in terms of the corporation's ability to scare people off, to raise up barriers to people who want to join a union. And you probably read all of the tactics they use, changing the stoplight outside of the facility so that workers didn't have the ability to talk to union organizers on their way out. They were putting up anti-union propaganda throughout the facility and even in the bathroom stalls, right? And they were holding captive audience meetings where they would make employees come in to hear anti-union propaganda, then have them show their ID badge as they exited so that everyone could be recorded, right, as to where they stood or what questions they asked. They were being surveilled. So it's a pretty steep climb for people who want to organize to face that kind of intimidation and harassment. And so that's why we need to change the law. But I wouldn't say that workers didn't want a union. I would say that basically the cards were stacked against them. There really was not a level playing field because Amazon could break the law with impunity and nothing happens, right? They can violate the law over and over again, and that's what we're trying to change with the PRO Act, is to have civil penalties and actual enforcement so that when that happens, the company pays a price and it's more of a deterrent. And we can get back to the origins of the law, because you probably know the National Labor Relations Act of 1935 actually encourages union organizing. That's the law of the land. Mm-hmm. But yet the law has been chipped away at over time, and it's so weak now that it takes tremendous courage to stand up and form a union now.
I'm curious, because, having worked and been a union employee myself, mm-hmm. What do you say to that new union worker who's coming in? How do you guide your union leaders to talk to new employees about the importance of joining the union? Because I remember the argument, I've got to give an X amount of dollars of my paycheck to this union. What am I getting for that? And I'm only making so much money as it is, and that's probably because of some deal that the union worked out with the company. So how do you deal with that?
Interesting, yes. I think that's on us, that we need to actually be creative and fresh in our approaches and really take a hard look at that, because I think we did get, over time when unions were strong in the, peak, I think it was in the mid-70s, that might have got a little lazy, right? That we just hand the union card over, people sign it, dues come out, and that's the end of the story until there's a problem.
Right.
We need to reverse that. We're not just going to be reactive. We're going to be proactive in ways to use the union, of course, for the bread and butter of wages, hours, and conditions, but we're actually using collective bargaining in new and creative ways. And you see journalists, for example, talking about their company's carbon footprint as a subject of bargaining at the table. Harassment and bullying, making sure that the sexual harassment policies are transparent and enforced. So I think there's, especially among young people, a desire to use that tool. It's a very powerful tool in new and different ways. And so I think that's something that we can be more creative and nimble and responsive as we modernize the labor movement, because we want our labor movement to reflect the changes and the dynamism in the economy, and that we as a labor movement are dynamic and flexible and nimble right along with it, and that we're representing the interests of workers in the ways that really matter to them. So, yeah.
So what are you doing to change the laws related to gig workers like Uber drivers and Lyft drivers? In California, they had a recent battle. And it seems like Uber, Lyft, and the trucking companies, they basically spare no expense to fight attempts at reclassifying those workers as employees rather than independent contractors. Mm-hmm. So do you have the resources to take on corporate giants like Lyft and others?
Well, that's our challenge, because the economy is changing. It's changing around us. This, quote, new business model that Uber has put forward, where they're basically, misclassifying their workers to get out from the responsibilities of being an employer, because most of the benefits that we enjoy as employees, as workers, are tied to our job, tied to our employer. So whether that's, workers' compensation or overtime protection, our health care, those are all tied to our job.
Right.
And so if we're going to start seeing this new system, this new business model, where workers are kind of falling through the cracks, they aren't covered by anything. Mm-hmm. So they're desperate. They're working on their own. They're basically feeling very alone, especially if they have a problem with the platform or the algorithm that they have to report to, where they don't have any interaction with a boss. We need a path forward for those workers, that they need the protections and the voice just like union members do.
Speaking of algorithms.
Yes.
So some people say that we're entering a fourth industrial revolution where new technologies such as artificial intelligence will rapidly change the future of work. So what are you doing to make sure that the interests of workers are considered as we're moving in that direction?
No, absolutely. I think this is the next frontier for the labor movement.
Yeah.
That as industries are changing and evolving, and certainly in big tech, there aren't many, if any, unions.
Right.
So that is our challenge, is to show those workers that they have power, they have voice, that by coming together collectively in unions, that they can actually change their circumstances and gain more power and influence in their workplace. So we saw this at Amazon, where algorithms were used to manage workers, and that was one of the biggest factors in that organizing campaign, was the lack of respect and dignity on the job, because you show up to work, you're talking to your phone, and basically orders are coming down without really any interaction or any say. And so that could be a pretty dire future. Is that the future that we want? Probably not. I would say most working people want a seat at the table. They want to have influence over how their workplaces are governed and what work looks like. And so we see a future of hope and promise as new technology is evolving, that if we have a worker voice and a collective way to exercise our power, that we can actually create a technological future that works for working people and not just sit passively by while the future lands on us. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last month I moderated the Teamsters debate right here at the National Press Club. Yes.
I've been wanting to watch that one online. So.
And see, that moderating that debate, the whole stereotype of Teamsters being big burly men and women, that immediately came to mind, and I was so happy to see a diverse audience. More women. But one of the things during the debate, both of the candidates seemed like they would be open to the Teamsters getting back involved with AFL-CIO. So where do you stand on that in terms of outreach to the Teamsters to get back in? And same thing with like other unions like SCIU and I guess NEA as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hold on just a minute. I'm going to need to make a phone call to the Teamsters. No, I'm just kidding. We are absolutely interested in a unified labor movement, and we are stronger together. And we have always said that, solidarity is our calling card.
Right.
And that, especially in this environment where we have everything lined up. We have the administration and the pro-worker Congress. We have workers taking risks like never before. We have the public favorable. So the field or the environment is ripe for more organizing. And the only way that we can actually grow the labor movement is by unifying all aspects of the labor movement together in one powerful force to make change. And so, absolutely, we are ready to do that.
You just described the Congress as pro-worker. Mm-hmm. How so?
Well, we have the PRO Act, of course, passed the House.
Right. But you also have the Senate.
We also have the Senate, which is badly broken.
Right.
The filibuster is standing in our way, and it's an arcane Senate rule that unfortunately is blocking progress on a lot of priorities, not only for our Workers First agenda, but we're seeing pretty much everything that comes down the pike has to vote, meet a 60-vote threshold. So we're saying that we need to democratize the Senate by getting rid of the filibuster. Okay. And get this agenda that we voted for in 2020 across the finish line, whether it's the investments in Build Back Better, whether it's the PRO Act, of course, immigration reform, and all of the priorities, voting rights. I mean, we're headed into an election and we're still talking about suppressing the vote instead of making it easier for people to vote. And all of that is sitting in the Senate graveyard.
Thank you. Okay, so the Trump administration's labor secretary, Eugene Scalia, championed the right to work laws and represented companies such as Walmart while in private practice as a lawyer. The current labor secretary, Marty Walsh, is a former union leader. So what changes have you seen at the Department of Labor that have changed since he's assumed office, and how is that working in your favor, if at all?
Wow, how refreshing is it to have a rank and file union member leading the Department of Labor? I mean, he gets it. He absolutely gets it. You don't even have to do any education on the issues because he's lived it. He has lived experience that he's bringing into that role. And that's another reason why the Biden administration gets an A+, right, is putting a rank and file union member in as Secretary of Labor. He has been touring this country, talking to workers, which most labor secretaries do, but I think Secretary Walsh has been in more training centers than even I have been in since he's taken the job. So I think it just shows his dedication, his commitment to looking through a worker lens in every decision he makes, including the ETS that's just been sent over to the White House. I think it was in the last day or so. Okay. So I think that he's looking, as I said, through a pro-worker lens, and whether it's regulation, whether it's policy, whether it's hiring, staffing up the agency, very consultative, of course, getting worker perspectives before decisions are made.
Can I be nosy? What did you?
Yes, I'm sorry. Very unusual to receive a note while I'm up here. IATSE workers, 60,000 workers I mentioned, in film and television just announced that they are going on strike on Monday, regardless of, they have this window to make progress at the bargaining table, but if they don't, they are going on strike on Monday.
Okay,
so you heard it here.
Okay, so how are you going to support that, or what are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's big news.
It is big news, and Matt Loeb, the president of the IATSE, is, of course, an affiliate and a leader at our table, and we have been in constant communication because this will be, one of the largest work stoppages that most of the country will take notice on, right? And of course, we talked about, the snacks getting us through the pandemic.
Right.
Film and television has been a baseline for most people, and these are the people that actually make that content happen. So we will stand with them in solidarity. We will use the full breadth and power of the labor movement to make sure that these companies are feeling the pain. And we have lots of levers that we can use in the labor movement, whether it's the bully pulpit, whether it's using our shareholder capital strategies levers. We have obviously just getting those bodies out in the streets to support them.
One of the big companies behind that, and I know, I recall I interviewed, and her name is escaping me right now, but she was in charge of one of the actor unions. Gabriella, yes, thank you. She's going to kill me because anyway, she was fantastic. Great. But she mentioned to me the situation with Netflix, and how on many of their sets people don't get breaks. Things like that. I mean, what do you do?
We're fighting for the weekend, as I said earlier. I mean, it's 2021, and these people are working overtime. They're, answering the call, and yet the companies now, who are making pretty tidy profits, suddenly can't pay overtime.
Yeah.
And suddenly you can't have a meal break.
Right.
And you're ending your shift on a Friday night and are being called back Saturday morning with less than 8 hours of time in between.
So I'm still looking for some specifics, because it's a David and Goliath situation in so many ways. I mean, when you have someone like a union like AFL-CIO going up against, say,
Absolutely.
a Netflix.
Yeah. And I'm glad you asked that because this applies to Amazon as well, that the labor movement can't do it alone. We have community partners and allies and other organizations we're engaging, but also the public. And I think that's something we need to be more creative about, is engaging the consumer. And, you know, the folks who are watching Netflix, the folks who are shopping on Amazon, you know, can we engage them in activism?
So is it a blackout Amazon day, a blackout Netflix day?
It could be. There are a lot of different ideas that are swirling out there, but the point being that that is a powerful tool when you can stand in solidarity with workers, consumers, you know, our elected officials, all of the those levers of power that we can influence, get the company's attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, I have a few more questions for you, but I need to thank some people before
Okay,
we
please
wrap
do.
things
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
So I'm going to go back up here to the
please.
podium. So, go back to my remarks here. Before we wrap it up, I just want to say thank you to the folks who organized today's headliner event, Donna Linewan-Leger and Lori Russo, who coordinated this, along with Jamie Horwitz, the member of the headliners team who helped organize this Newsmaker today, and our membership director, Kate Helster, here at the National Press Club, and of course, Executive Director Bill McCarran. And as soon as I can find my other notes, I'll be able to thank everyone else I'm supposed to thank. Just bear with me. Yeah, here we go. I'd also like to ask folks to join us for the upcoming National Press Club Headliners Luncheon with Jerome Pecresse. Mr. Pecresse is the CEO of GE Renewable Energy. We'll be having him here on October 28th. And on November 9th, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Dennis McDonough, will join us for a headliners luncheon. So all good stuff. And I also want to remind everyone that right here at the National Press Club on October 20th, we will be hosting the Fourth Estate Gala. And this year we are honoring NBC's Lester Holt. The event is a hybrid event. It's partially in person and partially online. So tickets are still available if you're interested in joining us and honoring Lester Holt, who I believe is America's newsman.
I love him. That's great.
So,
Can we also thank Corey and Rochelle and Verlissa, McCall, Keith, and Darlene, because these courageous workers are really the reason I'm up here.
all right, fantastic. I was going to ask, are there any questions from the audience? We only got like 2 from the audience. Anybody want to raise? You can remove your mask while you're asking your question.
I just wanted to know personally, as being the first woman of the AFL, how do you feel? What does that mean to you, holding that position, especially during this time?
Feeling the weight on my shoulders because I feel that I'm speaking for you. And I have stood on the shoulders of so many courageous women who have worked so hard. And this is the glass ceiling that we have finally broken. I'm getting a little emotional.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Like I said from the beginning, if you're not here, this woman has so much electricity coming off of her, so it's appropriate that you were involved in that.
Yeah.
So final question, and maybe not completely final because I'm not really good at always making things final. Where you came up?
Yeah.
Was it Gladstone?
Grew up in Gladstone. It's a suburb of Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, and you and I have something in common because we both went to public school.
Right.
And we both worked our butts off, as you say, from the time
Absolutely.
we left high school to now. Tell us a little bit about your experience in public school. What do you remember, and what was it that got you to think that this is what I want to do? I want to be involved in union work.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about this a lot since I took this job. How did this happen, right? How did I get here? And I think back to even when I was babysitting, when I was 11 years old, and a neighbor friend of mine and I were kind of the two babysitters, and we found out that we were getting paid differently. And so we came together and we organized. And I think it's this question of fairness that really drives me. And so when I got involved in organizing as a young person, you know, seeing the clerical workers at our electric utility company being paid differently and treated differently than their union counterparts, right? This idea that really unions are the path to getting a fair deal. And in high school, I was going to say what stuck with me was the teachers and how hard they worked and what an influence. And to this day, I bet every person in this room can remember a teacher that changed their lives, right? Mrs. Wilson, if you're out there watching, she was our English teacher and the head of our newspaper. And so that's where the journalism thing came from, right? I was on the school paper and the yearbook committee, and Mrs. Wilson was a true inspiration to me. And so I think also going through that path of journalism through my schooling, I wanted secretly to be Nina Totenberg originally, work for NPR. But then as I was working so many jobs coming out of college, and it was like today where you have to work 1, 2, and 3 jobs, I saw that we can do better, right? And getting involved in that organizing campaign changed my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it has been fantastic having you here today.
Thank you.
And hearing
You too.
about all the things that you're doing. And I'd love to present to you the National Press Club. It's very coveted. Woo. National Press Club mug.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
so much.
coming.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.